if you got a Bible, turn to Judges chapter 10. And what we're going to do, we're going to just kind of give you something to think about, and then we're going to continue to sing, and maybe it'll be something that just kind of, you can just in the back of your mind, let it kind of rumble around there. But we're talking today, last week we talked about when God's people do right. When God's people quit sitting around grumbling about everything, which is one of the things we're really good at, right? We're good at sitting around grumbling about how bad things are. You get a bunch of Christians together, and pretty soon they're going to begin to grumble about how terrible the government is, and how terrible this is, and how terrible society has gotten. We love to sit around and grumble about it. Sometimes we're not nearly as good about actually getting off our rear ends and doing something about it. But we like to grumble about it. Well, today we're going to kind of flip it, and we're going to say, what happens when God's people just sit around and grumble? What happens to society when God's people are not actively involved in trying to do something positive and to shine God's light into our society? In the book of Judges, you see this pattern. And it's this up and down pattern. The people sin, and we're going to read that today. We're going to read this. They sin, God sends an oppressor, they get out. But in the midst of this very depressing pattern, you have a couple of little snapshots. And we call them the minor judges, not the minor prophets. They're in another part of the Bible. But we call them the minor judges. And it's kind of interesting when you read some of the stories, and we read those last week about these minor judges, where it seems like in the midst of this just depressing up and down, that you have this time of peace and prosperity that maybe wasn't preceded by the evil that we read about in the rest of the book of Judges. And we talked about that last week. But this week, I want us to again, we're going to read chapter 10 of just a few verses. And it goes back to that whole deal that the people began to worship idols. Now, think about our own nation. Do we worship idols? Where's that picture? Do we worship idols? Okay, this one is not this show is not nearly as big as it was a few years ago. But we have idols in America. We just don't tend to call them idols unless you happen to be watching American Idol. But we have idols. There is one idol that is in almost every single home. Actually, I think it is. I think I've seen studies that there are more than one in almost every single home in America. And it used to be able to say, it was this square thing that was big, and a long time ago they actually sat on the floor. Now you hang them on your wall. Anybody have an idea what idol I'm talking about? Yeah, it's that thing we call TV. And we sit and worship at our idols way too often. Or we have it in our hand and we punch the buttons. Now you may go, wait a second, Grant, you're calling my smartphone an idol? Well, if it is one, then sorry. We have idols in America. We just don't call them idols. Now, is there anything inherently evil about a smartphone or inherently evil about a television? No, it's not. There's nothing inherently evil. It's how we utilize them. That we begin to make them our idols. We begin to place them. We place them in a position before God. And anything that is placed in position before God, the Bible calls an idol. If you got a Bible again, Judges chapter 10. Let's go to verse 6. Then the Israelites again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. They worshipped the Baals and the Ashtoreths, the gods of Aram, Sidon, and Moab, and the gods of the Ammonites and the Philistines. They abandoned the Lord and did not worship him. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel, and he sold them to the Philistines and the Ammonites. They shattered and crushed the Israelites that year, and for 18 years they did the same to all the Israelites who were on the other side of the Jordan, in the land of the Amorites in Gilead. The Ammonites also crossed the Jordan to fight against Judah, Benjamin, and the house of Ephraim. Israel was greatly oppressed. So they cried out to the Lord, saying, "We have sinned against you. We have abandoned our God and worshipped the Baals." The Lord said to the Israelites, "When the Egyptians, Ammonites, Amorites, Ammonites, Philistines, Sidonians, Amalekites, and Maonites oppressed you, and you cried out to me, did I not deliver you from their power? But you have abandoned me and worshipped other gods. Therefore, I will not deliver you again." Well, don't you know that was a scary day for the Israelites? I will not deliver you again. Go and cry out to the gods you have chosen. Let them deliver you in your time of oppression. But the Israelites said, "We have sinned. Deal with us as you see fit. Only deliver us today." So they got rid of the foreign gods among them and worshiped the Lord. But he became weary of Israel's misery. The Ammonites were called together, and they camped in Gilead. So the Israelites assembled and camped at Mizpah. The rulers of Gilead said to one another, "Which man will lead the fight against the Ammonites? He will be the leader of all the inhabitants of Gilead." Now, you may think that I am just standing up here pointing my finger at you and saying, "Oh, you people, you are the ones that worship idols." You got to understand, this is a passage, this is a story when we begin to think about how we worship idols and we worship things and we put things before God in our life. Whatever finger I have pointing, remember that old saying? Don't point your finger at somebody. Why? Because you got three more pointing back at you? I do. There are times in my life where I do that exact same thing. There are times in my life where I put something ahead of God in my life. When we do that, there's only one word for it, and it's sin. It is sin, and it creates huge problems in our society. What I want you to think about as we continue to worship, as we sing to and about this great God that we have gathered here to celebrate, I want you to ask yourself, what in my life gets put before God? What in my life do I make to be more important than God? Let's continue. Let's stand together as we continue to worship. Kenny, thank you for... Go back to that Judges chapter 10 passage, and I want you to just kind of hold it there because we're going to be talking about it. As you read this passage, you see this story of the Israelites worshiping idols. And you may go, that had to be just on the fringes of the society, right? It had to be on the fringes of the people, of the Israelite nation. Well, I want to tell you, this picture, it's kind of hard to see, but this is a picture of an idol altar deep in the heart of Israel. I can't remember exactly which city, but this is a city that we were visiting that was right close to the Sea of Galilee. You could actually, I think you could see the Sea of Galilee from the ruins of this city. But this was a fully Jewish city. Fully Jewish city. It did not have, there was nothing else in this city that would make you think that it had inhabitants from outside of the people of Israel, except for this one thing. Most likely this was to the god Baal or to Molech, which was another one of the foreign gods of that area. And it was right set in the middle of this Jewish town. And it was a town that was it was Jewish all around this area. And yet, here it was. And so, yes, that idolatry had infiltrated its way in. And we see that in the scriptures, that this idolatry had just infiltrated its way into the very core of the nation. But you and I know this, I hope. We're not a whole lot different. We haven't changed really all that much. As Thana mentioned, you read those stories, and you hope that Israel would figure it out and get it right after that pattern of up and down. I think we could say the same thing for us. I would hope that we could figure it out. But we're really not that much different than the people of Israel. We do that same roller coaster ride. And in a passage that we read, the writer of the book of Judges used a version of this, what we might call the betrayal formula. You know, it's that roller coaster formula. Things are going well, then people start sinning, the nation begins to sin, and they get into idolatry, and God sends an oppressor, and things go downhill until they get to the very bottom, to where they just think it can't get any worse. And they cry out to God and they say, "Oh God, please deliver us." And then God sends a deliverer that we call a judge. And he delivers the people, and things go well until that judge dies. And you know, it's like they're going well, and the nation is doing good. The nation has put away their idols, and things are going well. And then that judge dies, and then pretty soon they start back off that same path. It's just this roller coaster ride up and down and around. This one he expands a little bit, because the writer of Judges here goes into a little more detail on the sins of idolatry that the nation has gone into. He lists out a number of different ones, but he leaves two nations' gods for the end: the Ammonite gods and the Philistine gods. Now you may go, "Okay, Grant, so what? Who cares if he leaves those to the end?" Well, really what the writer is doing is he's kind of setting us up. And he's saying, you got these two last ones, the Ammonites, and that's who we're going to be reading about. We're going to be reading about the problem with the Ammonites in this section of Judges. And in the very next section of Judges, we're going to be reading about the problems with the Philistine gods. And anybody know who was the judge that dealt with the Philistines the most? Samson, there you go. Thank you. My son raised his hand too. Somebody trained him well, probably his mom. So you have these people, you know, and again, as we talked about last week, they had this period of peace, this period where things were really going well for the nation. And I think as we look at those, we can say, as we talked about last week, that, you know, a lot of that probably had to do with the simple fact that the people of Israel had leaders who led. They had godly leaders who pointed them in the right direction. I'm not going to say those men were perfect, because they weren't. They were human. They messed up. They sinned. But they tried to lead the nation in the right way. And things went well. But then their time was gone, and somebody didn't rise up after them to lead the nation and to continue to push the nation in that same direction. And when they didn't, what did they do? They went down that hill. They went back into their idolatry. You know, America has been the same. There has been times where our nation has risen up, and we've gone in the right direction. And we've made choices as a nation that point us in the right way. And there have been times where there have been incredible spiritual awakenings in this nation. And they have really kind of turned the course of our nation. And in so many ways, they have brought about the blessing of God on us as a nation. But there have been way too many times where we have forgot that. We have forgotten about God. And we have turned from that incredible blessing that God has given to us as a nation. And we become a hollowed out shell sometimes of the greatness of what we were. And I'm afraid as we look at our history, I'm afraid that we would have to say that the last great awakening in this nation has been far too long. The reality is that in our nation, things have now become accepted that really not that long ago would have been unthinkable. Things in our nation that we now accept and applaud as a society that not that many years ago we would have thought were unthinkable. I saw something on Facebook this last week that made me laugh, but then it made me kind of cringe. If you don't know, there was an NBA basketball player who came out and has said that he was gay. And he has just been applauded as this great hero for having the courage to admit what he is. Well, I saw something on Facebook. It had two pictures. It had one picture of this guy and another picture of a quarterback in the NFL by the name of Tim Tebow. And it had a little caption above him. And the caption above Tim Tebow was, "I'm Christian." And there was it had a caption of a newspaper reporter or something, somebody from the media, walking away saying, "You should just keep that to yourself." And then it had the caption above this NBA player, "I'm gay." And the reporter walking away saying, "What a hero. What a hero." Notice the difference? 20 years ago, would have been completely opposite. We would have been applauding somebody for standing up and saying, "This is my faith. I am a follower of Jesus Christ." Now he's told, just keep it to yourself. We have come as a nation to where we applaud things that once were unthinkable. Verse 7 points out the result of that failure. Because of the sins of Israel, it says that God gave them over to Ammon and Philistia. As I said, we're going to talk about the Philistine oppression when we get to Samuel at some point in the future. The Ammonites' oppression was focused on what is called the Transjordan. It's the other side of the river for Israel. But as we look at this passage, we look about this, we think about what has happened to this nation. This great nation of Israel is suffering, and now they are under the yoke. They're under basically the slavery to another nation. Now we can look at our own nation and we can say, oh, well, America, we're not slaves to anyone. That America, we are so strong that nothing like that would ever happen to us. And I will tell you, yes, right now, I don't think there is any way that any nation in this world would be able to take their military and invade our borders and enslave us. Right now, God bless us, fortunately, our military is strong enough that we could probably withstand and defeat any military in the world. But having said that, we need to understand that our nation is in danger. And why is our nation in danger? Because we have allowed that core of faith, that solid foundation of faith, to be hollowed out. Think about your house. You build a house, you want to build a good foundation, right? You want to make sure that the pieces of the foundation, if you're building it out of wood, you want to use the strongest, the best wood you can find, right? None of us are going to build a foundation to our house and go down to the lumber yard and say, "Hey, listen, I'm building a foundation in my house. Give me the oldest, rottenest, worm-eaten, termite-eaten boards you have, and I'll just stick them on there. They'll be fine." I'm not going to do that, right? If you're laying it with cement, you're not going to just go down to the cement factory and say, "Hey, listen, when you bring the cement out, don't worry about putting much stuff in there. Just sand is good. It'll be fine." No, when we put our foundation, we want to make sure that we build it strong. Well, America built its foundation strong, but we didn't do the things to take care of our foundation, and it's eroding. And I pray that we don't come to the point that Israel found, where they were oppressed from outside, and that they were basically overthrown because they walked away from their God. And we see God's response in this passage. Now when we get to God's response, if you've read Judges, you think, okay, well, here's what's going to happen. God, the people of Israel, they're going to cry out and they're going to say, "God, these Ammonites, they've come and they're oppressing us and they're enslaving us, and oh God, please come and rescue us." And God is going to do the superhero thing, and He's going to come swooping in and save the day. We see that so often. But look at this passage. Instead of God saying, "I'm coming in to save the day," God says to the people of Israel, in essence, "Time's up. You're on your own." Can you imagine hearing from God? Instead of hearing what you expect, oh, okay, don't worry, thank you for your contriteness of spirit. I'm coming in, and I'm going to save the day, and we're going to run them out, and I'll send you a great judge, a great military deliverer. Instead, God gives you a history lesson. Well, you know you had this problem against this group, and what'd I do? Yeah, I came and saved you. You know you had your problem against the Egyptians. What'd I do? Oh yeah, I came to save you. You know you had it against, and he just goes through and he lists off all of these different nations that are around them, and he says, and every time what'd I do? Oh yeah, I came and I rescued you. This time, God says, go cry out to those other gods. Go cry out to those ones that you have made more important than me. Cry out to them and see if they will save you. And when he says that, the people of Israel recognize how deep trouble they are in. They realized that this is a very bad situation. And so they recognize God's not going to do what he's always done. God's not going to come in and just save us and make everything go away like he's done so many times in the past. And so then the people of Israel begin to put action to their words. You know, they had said before God, we're sorry for worshiping these idols. But it almost reads as if when they're coming to him and they're saying, God, we're sorry for worshiping these idols, that they've got back here behind them, the idol is still there. The altar to worship that idol, it's still there. And the priests that lead those sacrifices, they're still there. And it almost reads as if they're not just there, that they're continuing. And then the people of Israel say, we're really sorry about that, but yeah, God, don't look behind us, because we're going right back to it. Now, when God says, time's up, you're on your own, the people of Israel fall on their knees and they say, oh God, we are wrong. And it says that they put away their idols. They put them away. And this is a time that you would expect for God now to come back and to say, okay, good. But look at the very end of this chapter. Look at that very last verse. The rulers of Gilead said to one another, which man will lead the fight against the Ammonites? He will be the leader of all the inhabitants of Gilead. Notice what's missing? God. There is no mention here. And as we follow this story of this guy named Jephthah, who ends up being the one that they finally appoint, it's very interesting as you follow that story. They kind of throw God in every once in a while, but that's really what it comes down to, I think. It's almost as if, boy, when they really get in desperate, they go, oh yeah, come on, God. Come back. God is not to be trifled with. The people of Israel, they made the step. They would say, yeah, we're going to put away our idols. And they try to do what's right. But they really didn't. There wasn't this sense of faith. Our nation needs a revival. Our nation needs the people of God, you and I, to get on our knees and to beg God to come and bring His hope in a powerful way to our nation. We need a change in the hearts and the minds of the people of this nation. We need it. And you can wait and say, well, you know, we'll pray for the President of the United States to lead a great revival. Or we'll pray for the pastors of some of those big, huge churches, that have 20,000 people. We'll pray that they lead a great revival. And we should pray for those things. We should pray that it starts to happen in the great big churches. We should pray that in the halls of Congress, that our congressmen and women, that they fall on their knees and give glory to God and make choices that are honoring to Him. But if that's all we do, then you and I are missing it. Because the greatest revivals don't start in the halls of power. The greatest revivals start in the hearts and the minds and the lives of common people. They start in lives like you and me. So I want to challenge you today to take your cards, your commitment card. On the back, it says, I commit to, 1, I will pray for revival daily. I want to challenge you to take some time every day, and to ask God to bring revival, not just to our nation, but bring it right down and say, God, bring revival in my heart. Bring revival in our church. Bring revival in our neighborhood, our city, our county, our state, our nation, and our world. Pray for it. Secondly, I will work to lead, and there is a blank, to become a follower of Jesus. I want to challenge you to put a name there. We've done it before. I have some of yours that I have been praying for you on a kind of a rotating basis that have before said, here is somebody that I want to share the hope of Jesus with. So I want to challenge you, write that name there. And I get it, I'll add it to the stack that I have, and I will continue to pray that you have an opportunity to share the hope of Jesus with somebody. How does a revival start? It starts in us, and then we start to spread it. And we share it with one, and we tell one person about who Jesus is, and we train that person to tell somebody. And then we go tell somebody else, and they tell somebody else, and those 4 people now start that process all over. It sounds slow, but it picks up speed. And then third, I will strive to be a better follower of Jesus. Why did I put that in there? Because folks, we can pray and we can gather here and we can have the most wonderful time of worship. And we can leave every single Sunday saying, oh, God was so present with us today. Oh, it was so wonderful to be in God's house and to worship Him. But then if we walk out of here and we live the same old garbage life that everybody else lives, revival will not happen. It's going to happen when you and I leave here and we lead a life that is changed by the power of God, by the power of Jesus in us. And we live that life with those around us. That's when revival will break out, because people will see and say, wow, there is something different, and I want it. Let's pray together. Father, thank you for the opportunity